Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of Thought Leaders. I'm your host, Chris Sheng, and today we have Joshua Rome, who is the founder and CEO of Runway Health. Thank you so much for joining us.
Happy to be here.
Of course, man, tell us a little bit about Runway Health, what you guys do, and what kind of companies you guys work with.
Yeah, of course. So Runway Health is a direct-to-consumer telehealth company that is entirely focused on travel health. So at our core, we make it more convenient, affordable, and accessible to obtain prescription medications and vaccines for many of the most common travel ailments. We work directly with consumers, obviously, and support the travelers across their journeys across all 7 continents, but also we partner and collaborate with the travel suppliers, the tour operators, cruise lines, travel insurers that are also helping to facilitate one's journey.
Interesting. So is it almost like a B2B to C model sometimes?
Yeah, exactly. So it's a B2B2C customer acquisition strategy. Our
Got it.
end user, our customer is that traveler, but we access that traveler through our partner network.
Got it. Very cool. Uh, Before we dive into what that looks like, because I'm sure there might be a story around that,
Yeah.
but would love to kind of hear your background a little bit more. I saw, you spent quite a bit of time in marketing and sales, most recently at Adobe for a while. What led you kind of into that space and just kind of in tech in the first place?
Yeah, I mean, I've always personally been interested in tech. Early adopter of latest and greatest cell phones in the early 2000s. Applied to a number of jobs post college, and Adobe was ultimately the best fit for me. So happy to go a little bit more into the background and journey if you want from Adobe and onward, but can take a
Yeah,
break
for
and
sure. Yeah, I'm curious as to like why Adobe, why sales specifically. I feel like from the conversations that we've had with a lot of different sales and marketing leaders that, are lifers in that space,
Mhm,
it's like 80% of the time they serendipitously, run into that becoming their career.
mhm.
And there's only like a few percentage of them that's like the hustler at school campus at elementary school selling baseball cards or lemonade or selling candy and the whole nine. So I'm just curious as to like what was your origination story of like just being in sales?
Yeah, so the first role I had at Adobe was actually supporting the sales team. So I was in operations, technically. I was considered a quote unquote SOS, a sales operations specialist. So I was supporting a group of account executives with everything from an operations perspective. I was actually sitting next to an individual that was helping to lead the development of a new product launch at Adobe called the Digital Publishing Suite. So this was around when Apple had released the first iPad. Adobe started developing some tools that were supporting traditional print publishers, helping to convert them to a digital workflow. And after about a year of kind of just overhearing his conversations and becoming, friendly with him, I wanted to have a bit more of a direct experience working alongside clients, and that really led to my transition out of operations and into a more direct sales role, working really from a business development perspective rather than an account executive, but to just start fostering relationships with, at that time at Adobe, it was these traditional print publishers.
Got it. Cool. And so segue that into, I know your other previous startup was also around this idea of travel and just but where did that come from? In
Yeah,
terms of then making that leap? Well, I guess like your personal experiences and then coming to ideation on a few things and then making the leap to entrepreneurship. When
sure.
did it happen? How did it happen? What did the ideas come from?
For sure. So after spending about 7.5, 8 years at Adobe, I felt like it was my time to try to venture off into something new. And along that timeline, my brother and father had actually started working on a new pharmaceutical company called Patagonia Pharmaceuticals. So in 2013, I joined my brother and father in helping to really develop new treatments for rare skin diseases was the premise of the business. So we went from concept and ideation through formulation and development, ran preclinical studies, ultimately ran a successful phase 2A clinical study on our patient population, at which time we knew we needed a partner to help fund some of those later stages of development. And in those search efforts, ended up divesting our assets to what became a public dermatology company. That exit was in 2019, which really allowed me to take a step back and try to better align my career with my passions. I've been an avid traveler for my entire life, traveled to over 70 countries, went on a program called Semester at Sea for a study abroad program, climbed mountains like Kilimanjaro and Toubkal in Africa. So prior to Runway, I actually had started a daily travel-based newsletter, really just looking to kind of rebrand my career, have something new to talk about. I grew that to a few thousand subscribers and then ultimately leveraged that user base into opening up my own travel agency.
Mm,
And that's really where the seeds for Runway were planted, was in building that business and starting to talk to the travelers directly and helping to plan their experiences.
got it. And so almost like kind of reverse engineering, I guess, right? So you had now this customer base potentially for something, right? And then it's and outside of just the travel agency services, but how did you connect the dots around what you're offering at Runway to being like the pain point for travelers, at least like, that you were talking to?
Yeah, I mean, so it almost very obviously became a pain point of my travelers.
Yeah.
I found that whether I was supporting that honeymoon in Bali or a family going on an African safari or a father and son that wanted to trek Machu Picchu in Peru, I was directly getting asked by these clients things like, what should I do about malaria medication? Or should I be worried about the altitude in Peru? Or what should I be thinking about for this upcoming trip to Indonesia? And found that, my frustrating response was simply to refer them out to talk to their doctor or visit a travel clinic. There are numerous challenges amongst that. Over 35% of millennials don't actually have a primary care provider. Over 40% of Gen Z does not. But even for those that do have a PCP, the average wait time to schedule a non-sick visit is over 3 weeks. So a lot of these primary care providers ultimately just refer you out to a travel clinic. These travel clinics are kind of antiquated brick and mortar establishments that are notoriously expensive, inaccessible outside of major metropolitan areas, and really just an antiquated consumer experience. So being familiar with this concept of direct-to-consumer telehealth, seeing the pioneers in the industry like Hims and Roman grow to become these multi-billion-dollar businesses, I thought there was a really unique opportunity to build a similar infrastructure, but really tailor it towards the needs of the traveler. And that's how a Runway was born.
Got it. And walk us through what that process was like of kind of early days from ideation, actually building out the business model.
Mhm.
Because in that process, I feel like it's not just about you can have all the domain expertise or experience, right? But then it's now like, okay, well, now I have to bring on developers. If you're not a technical person, how are you going about that? There's pros and cons to outsourcing those things versus like building them in-house and cost is also taking part of that. So how did you think about it? Now that you identified this pain point you wanted to solve for people.
For sure. So I was fortunate that I had aligned with a few investors very early on, the team behind Pareto Holdings. So that's originally founded by John Oranger, the founder of Shutterstock, and Ed Lando, a serial entrepreneur. They really helped give me some what I call day one capital to get started. And it really starts with, coming up with a name, the branding exercises behind that, starting to kind of draft out the architecture of what we want that customer experience to be. We did start early on bringing on some really key advisors, both from a technical perspective as well as a medical perspective, to help kind of craft the path of both the product and the offerings. We did work with an agency initially to get some of the, I'll call them, early concepts built. But what we did ultimately discover was we really needed to have a bit more control over the development of our platform, and found that it was a better idea for us to start to hire some full-time engineers and developers to manage that build. So, those first 6 months were really just kind of pulling all the pieces together, getting ready for what ultimately became a subsequent capital raise to help get this platform built and through the finish line, and really just supporting travelers.
Got it. And what are the different kind of like the different phases of the go-to-market, right? So, you kind of had this built-in audience from the beginning before even building this out. But um what was that period like? How did did you test some beta version or like an MVP of it with that group? How did you figure out, the messaging and all the things that allows you to ultimately scale a business?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm just curious about that.
Yeah. So, I think it's kind of multifaceted. One is being ultimately a user of our product, being that avid traveler, feeling like I somewhat innately knew what these travelers are searching for and what those pain points are. And then from a go-to-market strategy, looking at customer acquisition, having that background, starting to build a database of contacts of like-minded travel agents and advisors, tour operators, hotel managers, and the like, gave me an opportunity to really start conducting some of those early kind of qualitative research insights and talking with others in the industry, finding out what they needed to, support their clients and, building the tools around those needs is really how we went about it.
Okay. And talk to us a little bit about like traction to date. I mean, I know it's still a fairly young company, but like how have you guys, how have you guys been maneuvering through the markets? What are some of like the big milestones you've crossed?
Yeah.
What do you feel like comfortable sharing?
For sure. So we've supported travelers across all 7 continents to date. We've supported travelers across every ocean. For us, we have been growing month over month, which is super exciting. I'm really focused on this, idea of sustainable growth, which I think is sometimes forgotten in the current state of the industry. So while we do have some experimentation and some testing around a paid spend, your traditional growth marketing tactics of Meta and Google and other paid tools. Our focus really is on building out this partner network of travel suppliers that can create this recurring and sustainable customer base for Runway. So there's both an opportunity and a challenge in building in that capacity. So the opportunity is this more defensible moat, excuse me, that we ultimately have as we secure these partnerships. But it does just take a lot longer than paying that, Facebook or Google machine. Whether you're, getting 20 cents or $2 back on that dollar you put in, it all happens very quickly. But again, what we've seen over the past few years are these increasing challenges being, the decreasing efficiencies, the increasing costs associated with them, and finding that you really do need a multifaceted approach to growing a business today.
For sure. And what would you say, has there been any like kind of, I guess, just overarching themes within your industry as it relates back to perhaps like the variables in the macroeconomic environment? Uh, and are you servicing travelers that are based in the US, or does it, matter where they're based out of? And what does it look like from, global expansion standpoint, or how do you potentially see servicing other travelers globally?
Yeah. So, we were formally incorporated in April of 2021. So
Okay.
certainly right in the midst of the pandemic. Spent the better part of a year building out our platform, launching in June of 2022. And, despite, the pandemic being maybe somewhat starting to be behind us and travel really coming back that summer, I think it really, from what we know from a macro perspective, hasn't fully recovered. I believe maybe in 24 it technically will. 25, I think we're hoping for some growth. You know, but despite the macro environment of the travel industry as a whole, we were certainly leaning into this kind of newfound concept of traveling better prepared. Obviously, COVID kind of put this lens of, do I have, or I should say, what are the entry exit requirements for a particular country as it relates specifically to COVID? So not only now are you trying to determine, your check boxes of making sure you're prepared with, all of your items in the suitcase, but now that certainly includes both COVID and potentially other prescription medications or vaccines. So it has definitely crafted this new lens of health around travel in a way that I don't think we've ever really seen before.
Got it. Um, Kind of going just back to, your founder hat, and,
Yeah.
what's the size of the team now? And obviously, I think you as a founder, just even still just being like 2 years out, still wearing a lot of different hats, and with some of those experiences that you've kind of gone through, and skill sets you maybe picked up along the way, that you have a love-hate relationship potentially with,
Mhm.
because obviously you do have to pick up things and you just kind of have to get things done as you're
Yep.
going with limited resources. So I'm curious if you have a skill set that you have a strong emotional disposition towards one way or another.
Yeah. So, We scaled our team up after a pre-seed round of capital that we raised in November of 2021. So we built out our engineering team. We brought on some additional BD support reps and started really preparing for our launch. What we did find, as noted earlier, is that our particular go-to-market doesn't necessarily equate to supporting thousands of customers out the door. It's been a gradual buildup to that level of demand and customer base. So we have actually since scaled the team back from that launch and are now, I would say back to bootstrap mode. We did actually just come out of Techstars, powered by JP Morgan's spring cohort in New York City. And, what I really appreciated from that program was one particular talk from David Cohen, one of the founders of Techstars. And he kind of presented this idea of back to bootstrap. And what that means, for us at least is, just because you've raised capital in the past doesn't mean you can't effectively go back to bootstrap and be a bootstrap company now, not always seeking that next major infusion of capital, but spending wisely, growing sustainably, and really focusing on profitable unit economics. So that's where we are today. So today our team is small but mighty. We have a few full-time employees, a network of contractors and consultants that we tap into for various needs, a great team of advisors that are hands-on and really supporting the development and growth of the company, but really taking more approach of finding gaining a balance, I would say. Actually, going back to Techstars, one of my mentors, in one of the early conversations, kind of drew out this seesaw and equated our business to that, where you've got the tech on one side and the customers on the other side. And what we did was invest heavily in our technical infrastructure up front. So when you look at us from a seesaw perspective, we've got this fantastic tech that can support 10,000 customers a month. But we need to find those customers. So what we're doing now is really looking to find a better balance of that seesaw and customer acquisition before we really start investing more on the tech and starting to build out that team again. So some of the things I'm doing today of, still managing things like customer support, customer success, which, I think is very insightful for me to see the challenges that some travelers are having. One thing, that we did experience and have identified is that, unlike some other healthcare products where it's okay if it comes in, a week or 2 weeks, whatever it might be, if you've got a trip booked for, Sunday, you want to make sure your order's coming in time. Otherwise, it's potentially not even relevant to you anymore. So there's this different kind of mentality and psyche that travelers have, and that they're going through those final 2 weeks of preparedness and checklists, and they have a real emphasis on the timing of delivery and things of that nature. So customer support is insightful for me, but also not where I hope to be spending all of my time in the future.
Fair enough. And and talking to the customer, I mean, how much time are you guys just spending on continuing to grow the core competency of the business versus, possibly expanding the suite of services that you might provide?
Yeah, so it's fairly well balanced. Again, a lot of what we built upfront early on with our engineering team has set this fantastic infrastructure for us to continue scaling. There are certainly always nuances and updates that we're building from a technical perspective. Beyond that, we are adding to our portfolio, widening our net, so to speak, and how we can support these travelers. We really have a goal of displacing that traditional brick and mortar travel clinic over the next few years. And to do so, we need to, offer more than what was originally just a set of 5 different prescription medications. So even this month, we've launched and have been able to directly fulfill travelers with certain vaccines. So certain vaccines are actually oral, including the typhoid vaccine, and that's a product that we just added to our portfolio. And I've actually seen some excitement from our traveler base and being able to again procure this vaccine through our platform alongside some of the other medications that they might be getting along the way.
Got it. Cool. And then just kind of as we're coming up on time here, like what's kind of some of the stuff that you are thinking about, either personally or professionally as it relates back to the growth of this business, the growth of you as a founder and the CEO, over the next few years, right? I think like as I've is I've interviewed quite a few of these different types of leaders from across, various areas of expertise. It's like there's a different skill set to become a great leader. And some of it's inherent in people and intrinsic in terms of who they are innately. And sometimes, they have to really level up by, again, finding mentors or, self-educating themselves through, different types of methods. But where do you see yourself in that landscape of just constant like self-improvement as it relates to being, a better founder, better person, better leader overall, and just helping, I think the overall growth of you and the businesses as a byproduct, perhaps?
Yeah, I think for us, it will be interesting in that, we are pursuing a remote first work environment, both through my, partner and co-founder, and, our engineering team that is spread across the world and other, again, consultants and employees that are throughout the US. I do think there are some kind of unique nuanced challenges in starting a business with this kind of remote first culture that we will have to navigate. From a perspective of, being a good leader and founder, I think a lot of it is just being able to be, transparent and communicative when available. And for me, I do want to be an approachable founder. Just because I am the, quote unquote CEO doesn't mean that when we have that future customer support representative, in the business, they can't approach me in the same way that, my current co-founder and partner can, or others in the business. So really wanting to maintain, an approachable mentality. And I think for us too, as we continue building remotely, it's also finding opportunities where we can get together, in person to expand on not just having this kind of quote unquote 9 to 5 work relationship, but also really getting to know, who the team ultimately is. And I think that will help shift, perspectives and interactions down the road.
Got it. Very cool. Well, on that note, I want to say thank you so much for taking the time today and just sharing your journey, sharing a little bit about what you guys are building at Runway Health. And, again, just I guess the insights around what it actually takes to take something from ideation to then, an actual business and then trying to scale it up. So thank you so much.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me.